Shazam! Fury of the Gods is the sequel to 2019's Shazam, and when the daughters of Atlas threaten their home, Billy Batson and his siblings must step into action. Now, I missed the first Shazam when it came out in cinemas, but was really pleasantly surprised when I got round to it. It was really funny, it was charming, and just full of heart. I've also become a fan of the director, David F. Sandberg, as a person. He has a YouTube channel under the name Pony Smasher where he's made quite a few videos just breaking down the movie making process in a really unpretentious way. I can't think of any other director working on the level Sandberg is giving such personal behind-the-scenes insight like that. Yet, even with that, if I'm being honest, I didn't have the highest expectations for this one. Just the recent spate of superhero films hasn't done a whole lot for me. This was made prior to the James Gunn DC takeover, where DC seemed like a bit of a mess. And look, sequels are just a tough thing to pull off, but once again, I was really pleasantly surprised by this one. I think it's a really solid sequel. One of the toughest things for sequels to get right is to find a way to put your protagonist back to square one again after they've already accomplished their goal in the first one. And here, now that Billy's growing up and aging out of the foster system, he's scared of losing the family that he has. It's a really great place to start, and a problem that's really compounded by the fact that he and his siblings have superpowers. And I always think that's the best way, when the superpowers, which we all think would be great, make the personal problems so much harder. And Billy has 5 siblings who are all superheroes as well and have their own desires on how to use their powers that don't always align with Billy. And there's this struggle for him as he's trying to make sure that he just doesn't end up with less than he already has. And I really enjoyed that. The amount of siblings is one of the trickiest things this film has to balance. It's a lot of characters, and because they switch between child and adult versions of themselves, it essentially doubles the amount of moving pieces. That must have been an absolute nightmare to write, direct, and edit, but I thought they did a really great job of balancing all the players. And the amount of them ends up being one of this movie's biggest strengths. For the most part, it never felt like the switch from child to adult superhero was a complete character switch. You'd always see them as the one character. Weirdly, the only exception to that is actually Billy himself. The Shazam Billy is just so much more playful, but it's not a big issue. I will say the Fast and Furious joke that has been seen in every trailer does not get any better with context. This was a meme well over a year ago. It's already stale now, and it's only going to date the film, so it's a very weird choice, especially because I thought most of the other jokes were pretty solid. It's a funny movie. For the vast majority of this genre, on the big screen, the villains have been fairly forgettable, but I thought this one had some of the better ones. Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu are sisters, and I think that argumentative relationship made them way more interesting than if it was just one of them on their own. They bicker a little bit, they're not entirely on the same page, and I also thought their motivations were really interesting. They take on Shazam because they've got a personal issue with him, and I sort of wish they dug into that a little bit more. It's a little bit of a missed opportunity. They end up being decent villains that feel slightly underutilized. Lucy Liu especially. I wish she was just given a little bit more to work with. I also think the title of the movie does them a little bit of a disservice as well. I don't think they quite lived up to the Fury tagline, but that's just a small gripe. But I do think they help play into the best parts of this movie, where the stakes feel really personal. I liked how small scale the start of it felt. These characters aren't Justice League members, they're B-list superheroes dealing with smaller scale crimes. And that actually does help the villains seem tougher, because they're not quite as used to things on their scale. On a weird note, this had some of the most blatant use of product placement I've seen in a film recently. In a Reddit comment by the director, apparently the product was written into the script before shooting started, or before they'd even asked permission to use it, so it's not like it was forced on them, but it still felt really weird. For me, the film's biggest problem is the fact that it just falls into a fairly standard superhero movie third act. It's not bad by any means, but it's just something you've seen so many times at this point that a film really has to do something special to prevent it from just feeling really familiar. But even with that, it works well enough because Sandberg keeps the personal stakes really present, so I was still fairly invested in what was going on, even though we all know it's a foregone conclusion. It also has one of the best blink and you'll miss it director cameos. Sometimes the internet can make it seem like things have to be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever, which ends up making something that's pretty damn good feel sorta underappreciated. Shazam! Fury of the Gods is pretty damn good. I love the way it balances all these characters, the comedy is great, and it still manages to pack as much heart as the original. These are aspects that don't often get you as much praise if they're done right, but are so easy to get the balance wrong on, and I thought it was really impressive. It seems this really is not doing very well at the box office, and, it's hard to feel bad for the big blockbuster superhero film, but it's a shame because this is one of the better ones. I had a fun time with this, and I'd give it a decent 7.